I'll never forget the night he kissed me like I was his entire world. His hands trembling as they cupped my face, whiskey on his breath. It was passionate, desperate, like he was drowning and I was his only air. But the next morning, he barely looked at me. That was the moment I started wondering if his love only came alive in the dark, with a bottle in his hand. How did I fall so hard for someone who only touched me when he was drunk? Asterisk, it all started at a crowded rooftop bar. Ferry. Lights twinkling against the city skyline. I was 24, fresh out of a dead-end job, sipping a gin and tonic, feeling like life was finally opening up. That's when I saw Ethan. He was leaning against the railing, his dark hair catching the glow, laughing with friends. His eyes met mine, and I swear, it felt like the world slowed down. He had this quiet confidence, like he knew exactly who he was. When he walked over and asked my name, his voice was warm, like honey over gravel. I was done for. Asterisk, we talked for hours that night. He told me about his childhood in a small town, how he'd moved to the city to chase his dream of becoming a photographer. I shared my own dreams, how I wanted to write stories that made people feel less alone. We laughed over stupid things, like how we both hated olives but pretended to like them to seem sophisticated. By the end of the night, he brushed a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering just a second too long. "You're different, Leela," he said. My heart fluttered. I thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Our first date was a week later, at a little Italian place with checkered tablecloths. He showed up with a single daisy, saying he'd picked it from a park because it reminded him of me, simple but beautiful. I blushed so hard I could barely speak. We shared a plate of spaghetti, and when our forks tangled over the same noodle, he laughed and leaned in to kiss me. It was soft, tentative, but it set my whole body on fire. I thought, this is the beginning of something real. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Ethan was attentive, texting me good morning with silly emojis, planning dates like picnics in the park or late-night drives to stargaze. He'd hold my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my skin, and I'd feel so safe, like I'd finally found my person. But there was one thing that felt off. He never touched me unless he'd been drinking. At first, I didn't notice. We'd be out with friends, a few beers in, and he'd pull me close, his hands wandering, his lips urgent. One night, after too many whiskeys, he pinned me against his apartment wall, kissing me like he couldn't get enough. My heart raced, my body melted into his, and I thought, this is love. But the next morning, he was distant, sipping coffee in silence, his hands never reaching for mine. I brushed it off. Maybe he was just hungover. Maybe he was shy. Why didn't I see the signs? I started craving those drunken nights, the ones where he'd let go, where his hands would find me, his eyes burning with something raw. I'd wait for the clink of a glass, the looseness in his laugh, because that's when he'd love me the way I wanted. Sober Ethan was sweet, thoughtful, but reserved, like there was a wall between us. I told myself it was just his personality. I told myself I was lucky to have him. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered, what if this isn't enough? We moved in together 6 months later. A cozy apartment with exposed brick walls and a tiny balcony. I was so happy, decorating our space with thrift store finds, imagining a future together. One night, we threw a housewarming party, and Ethan got drunker than I'd ever seen him. He pulled me into our bedroom, away from the music and laughter, and kissed me so hard I could barely breathe. His hands roamed my body, urgent, possessive, and I felt alive, wanted. I love you, Leela. He slurred, his breath hot against my neck. I clung to those words, to that moment. But the next day, he was back to his quiet self, avoiding my touch, my gaze. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, my heart heavy. Why does he only want me when he's drunk? What was I missing? Was it me? Was I not enough? I started replaying every moment, searching for clues. But the more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I loved him so much it hurt. But that love was starting to feel like a weight. I didn't know it then, but I was about to uncover a truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew. Asterisk, the doubt crept in slowly, like a shadow stretching across a room at dusk. I'd always been the kind of girl who trusted too easily, who saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. But with Ethan, the cracks in our perfect love story started to show, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. Why did he only touch me when he was drunk? Why did he pull away when the alcohol wore off? I started watching him closer, my heart a mix of hope and dread, searching for answers I wasn't sure I wanted. Asterisk, it wasn't just the touching. There were other things, little things, that nagged at me. Like how he'd get quiet when I asked about his past relationships. They didn't work out, he'd say, his eyes darting away. I'd laugh it off, tease him about being mysterious, but it left a knot in my stomach. Or how he'd spend hours editing photos late at night, his laptop screen glowing, but he'd never show me his work. It's not ready, he'd mumble, closing the screen when I got too close. I told myself he was just private, an artist protecting his craft, but the excuses were piling up, and I was starting to feel like a guest in my own relationship. Asterisk, one night, we went to a friend's birthday party, a loud, sweaty club with neon lights flashing. Ethan was 3 drinks in, his arms slung around my waist, his lips brushing my ear as he whispered something I couldn't hear over the music. I leaned into him, craving that closeness, but my eyes caught something a woman across the room, staring at us. She was tall, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair. Her gaze locked on Ethan like she knew him. When I turned to ask him who she was, he was already pulling me to the dance floor, his grip tight. "Just some girl," he said, his voice too casual. My heart sank. Who was she? The next morning, I brought it up over coffee. "That woman last night, she seemed to know you." Ethan shrugged, stirring his mug, his eyes fixed on the table. "Probably just someone from a shoot," he said, but his jaw was tight, and he changed the subject so fast it made my head spin. I wanted to push, to demand answers, but I didn't. I was too afraid of what I might find. Instead, I smiled, kissed his cheek, and pretended everything was fine. Why was I so scared to confront him? The red flags kept coming. He started staying out later, saying he was meeting clients or scouting locations for shoots. I'd wait up, curled on the couch with a book I wasn't reading, listening for the sound of his key in the lock. When he'd come home, he'd smell like whiskey and cigarette smoke, and he'd pull me into his arms, his touch hungry, reckless. Those nights were electric, his kisses deep and consuming, like he was trying to prove something. But the mornings after were always the same, cold, distant, like he was a stranger wearing Ethan's face. I'd lie awake next to him, my heart aching, wondering what I was doing wrong. Was I imagining things, or was something breaking between us? One evening, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket dinner for 2 at a fancy restaurant I'd never been to. The date was a night he'd said he was working late. My hands shook as I held it, my mind racing. Was it a client, a friend, or something else? I waited for him to get home, my stomach in knots, but when he walked in, sober and tired, I couldn't bring myself to ask. He kissed my forehead, said he was exhausted, and went to bed. I stood there, clutching the receipt, feeling like a fool. Why couldn't I just ask him? The suspicion was eating me alive. I started checking his phone when he was in the shower, my heart pounding with guilt and fear. There was nothing obvious, no flirty texts, no strange calls, but there were deleted messages. Gaps in his conversations that made my skin crawl. I'd lie in bed, replaying every moment of our relationship, trying to pinpoint when things changed. Had he always been like this? Or had I missed something? The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was losing myself. What was he hiding? I started dreaming about that woman from the club, her piercing eyes haunting me in my dreams. She'd laugh, her voice sharp, saying, "You don't know him at all." I'd wake up gasping, Ethan asleep beside me, his face peaceful. I wanted to shake him, demand the truth, but I was terrified of what it might mean. I loved him so much, but love was starting to feel like a trap. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, wondering, waiting for the other shoe to drop. What happens when you love someone you can't trust? Asterisk. The truth came crashing down on a rainy Tuesday night. The kind of night where the world feels heavy, like it's holding its breath. I was home alone, scrolling through Ethan's Instagram, something I'd started doing obsessively. His photos were beautiful cityscapes, strangers' faces, moments frozen in time. But then I saw it, a photo of a woman's hand, delicate, with a silver ring I didn't recognize. The caption was vague, just a heart emoji. My stomach dropped. I knew that hand wasn't mine. Who was she? I clicked through his tagged photos, my heart racing. There she was, the woman from the club. Her name was Claire, according to her profile. She'd tagged Ethan in photos I'd never seen, the two of them at a gallery opening. Her arm looped through his, a candid of them laughing at a cafe, the same one from the receipt. My hands shook as I scrolled, each image a knife to my chest. The dates on the photos overlapped with our relationship, some from nights he'd said he was working. I felt sick, betrayed, like the ground had been pulled out from under me. How could he do this to me? I waited for him to come home. The rain, pounding against the windows, my mind a storm of anger and hurt. When he walked in, soaked from the downpour, I was sitting on the couch, his phone in my hand. "Leela, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice soft, but I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. I held up the phone, showing him the photo of Claire's hand. "Who is she?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He froze, his jaw tightening, and for a moment, I thought he'd lie. But then he sighed, ran a hand through his wet hair, and said, "We need to talk." Why did those words feel like the end? He sat across from me, his eyes avoiding mine. "Claire's someone from my past," he started. "We dated a few years ago. It was messy, but it's over." I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. "Over? Then why is she in your photos? Why are you having dinner with her?" My voice cracked, tears burning my eyes. He looked down, his hands clenched. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said. "When I'm with her, it's easier. I don't have to think." I stared at him, my heart splintering. "And with me," I whispered. He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. How could I love someone who didn't love me back? I pushed further, my voice rising. "Is that why you only touch me when you're drunk? Because you're thinking of her?" His face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw guilt. "It's not about her," he said, his voice low. "It's me. I can't feel anything unless I'm drinking. It's the only time I'm not stuck in my head." I blinked, trying to process his words. "What does that even mean?" I asked, my voice breaking. He looked at me, his eyes raw. "I'm broken. Leela, I've been trying to be the guy you deserve, but I'm not." Was this the truth? or just another excuse. The confrontation spiraled. I shouted, cried, begged for answers. He admitted he'd seen Claire a few times, that they'd kissed once, but swore it wasn't an affair. It's not about love, he said. It's about escaping. But to me, it felt like betrayal. Like every touch, every drunken kiss had been a lie. I thought of all the nights I'd waited for him, hoping for his love, only to realize he was running from something I couldn't understand. I grabbed my coat, tears streaming down my face, and walked out into the rain, leaving him standing there. How do you walk away from someone you still love? I wandered the city for hours, the rain soaking through my clothes, my heart a mess of anger and grief. I kept replaying his words, his confession that he was broken. Was it true? Was he struggling with something deeper, something I'd missed? Or was it just a way to dodge responsibility? I wanted to hate him, but all I felt was pain. I checked into a cheap motel, unable to face our apartment, and cried myself to sleep, clutching a pillow, like it could hold me together. What do you do when the person you love is a stranger? The days after the confrontation were a blur of tears and silence. I stayed at the motel for a week, ignoring Ethan's calls, his texts begging me to come home. Every message felt like a punch, a reminder of the love I thought was mine. I kept seeing his face, the way he'd looked when he said he was broken, and I wondered if I'd failed him somehow. Had I not loved him enough? Had I not seen the signs? My heart was a battlefield, torn between anger and longing, and I didn't know how to move forward. How do you heal when your heart is still breaking? I moved out the next week, packing my things while Ethan was at a shoot. Our apartment, once a symbol of our future, felt like a graveyard of memories. I left the daisy he'd given me on our first date, now dried and brittle, on the kitchen counter. It felt like letting go of a piece of myself. I moved in with my best friend, Sarah, who held me as I cried, her arms the only thing keeping me from falling apart. She didn't push me to talk, just made me tea and listened when I was ready. Why does it hurt so much to lose someone who hurt you? The betrayal haunted me. I'd lie awake, replaying every drunken kiss, every moment I'd thought was love. Had it all been a lie, or was there truth in his brokenness? I started therapy, something I'd always resisted, and slowly, I began to untangle my feelings. My therapist helped me see that Ethan's actions weren't about me, they were about his own struggles, his inability to face himself sober. But it didn't erase the pain. I missed him, missed the way he'd made me feel alive, even if it was only in fleeting moments. How do you stop loving someone who broke you? I started writing again, pouring my pain into stories, letting my characters carry the weight I couldn't. It was cathartic, like bleeding onto the page. I wrote about a woman who loved a man, who couldn't love her back, and through her, I found pieces of myself. I started running, too, the rhythm of my feet against the pavement grounding me. Each step felt like a reclaiming, a way to take back my body, my heart. I'd run until my lungs burned, until I could almost forget the ache in my chest. Why does healing feel like losing him all over again? Months later, I saw Ethan at a coffee shop. He was alone, his camera on the table, his eyes tired. My heart lurched, but I didn't approach him. He looked up, saw me, and for a moment, we just stared. I wanted to ask if he was okay, if he'd found a way to fix what was broken, but I didn't. I smiled, a small, sad smile, and walked away. It was the first time I'd chosen myself over him, and it felt like freedom. When did I start becoming whole again? I'm not fully healed. Some days, I still feel the sting of his betrayal, the weight of those drunken nights. But I'm learning to trust myself again, to believe I'm enough. I'm writing a new story now, one where the heroine doesn't need someone else to complete her. I'm starting to believe in love again, but this time, it's love for myself. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply it broke you, know that you're not alone. Healing is messy, but it's possible. What's your story? Have you ever loved someone who couldn't love you back? Sometimes the hardest part of love is learning to love yourself first.